This is Module 3, Creating Drawings. In this module you will learn how to use design layers and classes. You will learn when to use design layers and classes. You will learn how to control viewports and sheet layers. You will learn how to control text and dimensions. And you will learn how to use tools and commands in detail. This is Lesson 3.1, Design Layers and Classes. In this lesson, you're going to learn when to use design layers. You're going to learn when to use classes. You're going to learn to use class and layer options, and you'll learn to use classes to control graphics. Back to Vectorworks. This lesson is all about using design layers and classes to organize our information. These two concepts, the design layer and classes, these are our fundamental ways of getting our information together or organizing our information so that we can produce complex or sophisticated drawings. We'll start by looking at design layers. Design layers can be thought of as groups of information. I just need to bring your attention over here to the navigation palette. We'll be using this a lot. This is our navigation palette. I'll bring it out here so you can see it, or I'll dock it later. We have the ability to control our classes and the ability to control our layers. These are our design layers. This is sheet layers, what we've looked at previously for creating viewports and drawings. But let's talk about design layers first. So design layers are our first organizing method, and really they're groups of information. So if it was a landscape project, for example, we might be using a layer to group information together, like all of our hard landscaping together, or all of our soft landscaping together, or all of the imported information from a consultant. If we're an architect, we might use design layers to break our project up into stories. So we might have ground floor, first floor, or for in America we might have first floor, second floor, foundations. Those would be our organizing our design layers into chunks of information that match our building structure. In this example, I have the ability to see layers. These are my design layers here. I've got a balustrade layer and I've got a structure layer. And you can't see the difference between them because I have both of them set to be visible. So this is a visible column, this is an invisible column, and this is a grey column. So I've got structure as visible because it's the active layer, it's got the tick. If I turn the balustrade off, you'll see that all the balustrade information vanished together. If I turn off the structure design layer, it is still visible because it is the active layer and it has the tick. Just up here you'll notice that structure is the active layer up here. I can choose balustrade, and now you can see all my balustrade components, but I can't see my structure. Let's turn those back on again. I've got layer options. These layer options allow me to choose how I see the other layers. If I choose active only, it's a little bit like turning off all my other layers. If I choose grey others, I can see them, but they're grey and they're see-through. If I choose grey snap others, then I can see them, but I can also snap onto them. Very useful for some cases. I can see the other layers, but I can't snap onto them. So now I can't snap to them, I can't see the edges of them. I can choose Show Snap Others, and then I can see and snap onto those other objects. And the final one is Show Snap Modify Others. And just while you're learning, I think you should leave this one alone because you can easily select objects in other layers without realizing it. Let's have a look at classes. So the idea of classes is that we can have fine control over objects. You can think of design layers as being where things are and classes being what they are. So you can see I've got a bottom of my balustrade, I've got a post for my balustrade, I've got a top rail for my balustrade. And so I've divided up my balustrade into components. I've got a structure as well, so let's just turn all those off. Turn off dimension. So stainless steel, that's my bracket part. If I have a structural part, I've got a beam, that was the front edge beam. I've got bolts, which I can turn off. Let's turn off my stainless steel. I've got a floor joist, I've got flooring, I've got washers. Turn off my beam. And none is my active class, and this object is assigned to the none class. In reality, this should probably be assigned to my post class, this one here. if I right click on my post, I can then assign that to my selection. So that will assign that selected object to that class. Or I can come up here and I can choose balustrade, post, and that will assign that object to the post class. One of the things you can do with classes that you can't do with layers is use classes to control the graphic design or the graphic style. Here it's got a question. Do you want the selected objects to use the graphic attributes of the new class? Well, actually, yes, I do. And I don't want to answer this every time, so I'll say always do the selected action. Now that object has been changed. It's now on the post class, and you'll now notice that it shows up along with the other post, and you might notice that it's also changed its color. So we can use classes to control the graphic style of things. So if you're doing landscaping, you might use classes to control all of the hardscape, or you might use it to control all of the irrigation or all of the roading, so that all of the roading looks the same. If you're an architect, you'd certainly use classes to control things like stormwater, soil pipes, walls, foundations, floor joists, that kind of thing, because it's an easy way of making sure that all of your drawings are consistent with their line weight, line style, and so on. We have the same ability with classes to control their options, but please just leave it on Show, Snap, Modify Others. This is the easiest way to use Vectorworks. If you change your class options away from that, there is a danger that you will not be able to select some objects. Now I've got my classes set to be in a hierarchy menu. Just here you can see there's a hierarchy, and I can collapse or I can expand them all with Option click or Alt click on a Windows machine. And I don't want to see that again. So what does the hierarchy mean? Well, the hierarchy means that I have this ability to hide these, and when I've got a lot of classes, this is a really easy way of tidying up my structure. If I turn off hierarchical display, you can see that I've now got a list of names, and I've used the word balustrade with a dash at the front of each of these names, and that's what creates my hierarchical structure. I can sort these by visibility. I can sort them by their name, so I list them in name order or alphabetical order. And if I turn on hierarchical display, I can't then sort them in that way. So I go hierarchical display. You'll now notice when I click here, I'm not allowed to do that. So we use design layers for the main or the first part of organizing, keeping all of our similar things together, and we use classes for what they are. Let's have a few simple rules. So I got 3 rules for design layers. Rule number 1, use layers when you want to structure the file to create groups of objects. So from a landscape point of view, you would have a layer for the base information, for example. You might have a layer for all of your soft landscaping, and you would have a layer for all of your hard landscaping, for example. If you're an architect, you would use design layers for stories of the building, foundations, first floor, roof, and so on. So you're grouping together similar objects. If you're in the entertainment industry, you would use layers to group similar information together. So maybe all of your lighting is on one design layer, your building is on a separate design layer. You use design layers to structure your file for scheduling and reporting. So when we want to report all of our plants, for example, on one particular part of the site, they could be in a different layer. The other time that you want a new design layer is when we have a different scale. So if I'm drawing details at 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, I will have a 1 to 5 layer for drawing details and a 1 to 10 scale layer for drawing details at 1 to 10. It's just a lot easier to do that. Let's have some rules for classes. So rule number 1, we need a class every time we want to control visibility of that object separate from other objects. So you might notice I've got 2 objects here on the same class for the post. I want them to turn on and turn off at the same time, so they're on the same class. I use classes to control the graphic style, so to control the line weight, the line color, the fill, the texture. These are things that are controlled together, so when I look at my top rail, that's a different color from my post because it's on a different class. We can use classes for scheduling and reporting, so I can find all of my top rails and report the length or volume or weight or some other thing that I might want to report. So those are my 3 simple rules for layers and classes. So let's just have a look at our top rail. I'll select the top rail and I'm now going to edit the class. So right click, edit. And it allows me to change the color. So let's change the color to a bright red color, and we should notice that that object changes straight away. So I'm using classes to control the graphic style. I'm just going to undo that. I'm going to put my navigation palette back. So just remember, classes are here, design layers are here, sheet layers are there. When I bring this back on a Windows machine, I think you might notice there's a little box here. There are 4 little icons and you can choose where to dock it. On a Macintosh, you have to bring it down until the bottom highlights, let go, and now my navigation palette is docked there. I can grab that little bar there and slide it up and down. Using the navigation palette is not the only way to control layers and classes. If we go to Tools on the menu bar, there's also an Organization dialog box. So this Organization dialog box allows us to look at classes, design layers, stories, sheet layers, and so on. So here are my design layers. Both of them are drawn at 1:1 scale. Here are my classes, and I can turn some on, I can turn some off, I can create new ones. So I'm going to call this a balustrade. Post bottom. So I'm going to create a new class for that post bottom so I can turn it on and off or use it for reporting. I'm going to edit the properties after creation. You don't always need to do this, but I just want to show you how this works. When we edit the properties after creation, we have this dialog box where we can choose the graphic style of things. Let's just have a look at what colors we want to use. Classic Vectorworks colors, I'll make that a purple. What line weight do we want? We can make it really heavy. Do we want to assign a text style to that? Could be quite handy if we're using text styles. We'll cover those in a future movie. Textures, we can choose the texture. This is an object texture, so I can choose a metal chromed brushed. I can choose a description, and I can type in this as the bottom part of the posts. Just make sure I spell it right. And my visibilities. Now I don't want to get into the visibilities just yet, so we're going to look at our graphic attributes. We can control our textures. We click OK, and there it is. It's created this class. Now it hasn't done anything with it. It's not assigned to any particular object. But if I select that object there, I can come up here and I can go post bottom. I can also use this to do it. Down here I can assign to selection, and it'll assign that to the post bottom. You can see it's now got a different graphic style. So let's take this a little bit further. I've got a building project here, and you can see I've got a lot of information on this design layer, and you might notice I've set up my multiple view panes as well. So this is my design layer, this is also a design layer view, and this is my sheet layer view. In the sheet layer I might want to look at something like my foundation plan. So there's my foundation plan. How do I get from here to there? I often use a tool called the visibility tool, which is only available if you have Vectorworks Architect, Designer, Landmark, and so on. So I'm going to change my workspace, Tools, Workspaces, and I'm going to change to Architect. There's a tool here called the visibility tool. Now this is only available if you've got Landmark, Architect, Entertainment, that kind of thing. But it is a fantastic tool, so I'll just move these out of the way. This tool allows me to control layers or classes. I can make them visible or invisible. So I've chosen classes, invisible, and when I move near an object, let's say like the furniture, you can see the word furniture main highlights along with all the other objects of the same class. Click on it and it turns those off. For example, all my electrical doesn't need to be on my foundation drawing, so I'll turn those off. What about note, this is my demolition work, so I don't need to see that. I don't need to see my walls demolished. This is floor finishes, I don't need to see those. There's floor finish demo, I don't need to see that. And I can just zoom in and turn off the things I don't want to see. So I need my bearers, I need that, I need my dimensions. Maybe I don't need my pergola, maybe I don't need that or that, but I need my columns shown. What else don't I need? I don't need my exterior walls, I want to see my foundation walls, I don't want to see my bracing. And I'm now left with a plan that looks like my foundation plan. Oh, here's some more demolished stuff here, I don't need those, and I don't need that. And now I'm left with my toilet areas here. I don't want them to be quite as solid as that, so I'll make those grey. So I just change to grey, highlight those. They've now gone grey, which you might notice matches my plan. That's what I set up before I created my plan. So you can see it's quite easy once we've got our classes working. It's so easy now to create the drawings we want, quite complex drawings. You might notice this is the plan that we originally started with. I just go back to my selection tool. When you finish with the visibility tool, you've got to go back to the selection tool. The cursor looks the same, you'll easily get confused. So let's find a class that we want to play with. How about our services soil? So services soil are my soil pipes here. So let's go right click and we'll go edit, and we want to edit those, and we might want to make a change to those. But the other thing I can do is I can make that change not on my design layer, but I can make that change here in my viewport. So now that we're using classes to control the graphic styles of objects, I can make changes to my viewports and have the classes change just in that one viewport. So here I'm going to choose classes. I'm going to go to my soil pipes. It's these ones here. I'm going to edit that. And now I can say that I want that to be a black line or a dark grey line. I want that to be really heavy so that they really stand out. And then I click OK. OK again. And you'll notice that the soil pipes changed here on this sheet layer, but they did not change in my design layer. And they won't change on any other viewport, just in this one viewport. So this is a really handy way. I'll just fit to page area. So this is a really handy way of making your drawings even more sophisticated. Let's just go up here and I want to choose my demolition plan. So here's my demolition plan. I'll just zoom in. In fact, I'll choose it here so it's easier for you to see it. So there's my demolition plan, and you might say that the demolition walls are just a little bit faint, a little bit hard for the contractor to see them. So I can go to my classes here. Now I know that these are all on a class called wall demolished. So I can choose that. Let's edit that. And we want to give that a patterned fill, so we want these to sort of stand out a little bit. We want this to be really heavy, so 0.7. OK, let's just click on the preview button, and now you can preview, you can see the difference. Big difference between one wall style or one drawing and the other. If I cancel it, you can see they've gone back. So using classes is a very powerful way to control your graphic style. I really recommend that you learn how to use these classes, use them really well, because you can create very complex, very sophisticated drawings if you use classes to control the graphic styles. I want to have a look at classes again, and I want to go back to my mod level 1. There we are. And I want to show all of my classes, and I can use my option click or alt click and it'll turn all of my classes on. I have the ability to filter classes, so I can filter classes by just showing me all the ones that are visible. So let's just undo that, edit, undo. So there we are. Let's go back and we'll go filter. Let's have just the visible classes, and you'll notice that all my invisible ones have vanished. Let's have a look at just looking at the invisible classes, and there they are, all except the invisible ones. So it's a really easy way of filtering the information, because you can see I've got a lot of classes here. Let's go all classes. These filters are things that you can create, and they're controlled in this organization dialog box here under manage filters. So you might want to create a new filter, and we'll call it services. And the class name starts with services. And it'll show you what we're going to see. So it's got all of those. We can also have tags. we can also have visibility controls. So I click OK, and click OK once more. Now I have a new filter called Services, and it'll just show me the classes that start with the word Services, making it easy for me to find my services. We have a similar thing with design layers, where we can create filters for these, and again it's on the organization dialog box. So design layers and classes, really important. This is the end of lesson 3.1. In this lesson you learned when to use design layers, you learned when to use classes, you learned to use layer and class options, and you learned to use classes to control graphics.